Welcome to this Marine Insurance Masterclass. Our guest is Martin Lanting, an esteemed expert in the field of international marine liability insurance. With a career that extends over 40 years in the marine insurance sector, Martin is undoubtedly one of the foremost experts you could learn from. Make sure to pay close attention as we're set to cover a wealth of information.
Hello everyone, welcome back to a new podcast episode. Today we are joined by Martin Lanting. You are expert in international marine liability insurance, and you are the founder and CEO at Marine Underwriting.
Correct.
That's correct. Perfect. Can you introduce yourself?
Well, I started my career as a youngster in the port of Rotterdam, getting involved in shipping, chartering, bunkering, stevedoring, everything that the port of Rotterdam was offering. After 13 years in that business, being inspired by learning more about maritime law, I switched my career to marine insurance and started to work for a company as a P&I claims handler. And it's probably my unrest about wanting to go further and further that I got into the situation of creating my own business. So in 1988, I established the P&I specialist in broking Dutch P&I services. I left that company already in 1993. At that time, I felt that I should not be a broker because as a broker, you have always to get the approval from the insurer. So I said the next step that I need to make is to be authorized by the insurer to make decisions on their behalf, both in underwriting and in claims. And that was the company Marine that I established. And that was from 1993 till 2013, when I sold the company to MS Emlyn. They have continued that business, but they have not kept the name. So the name Marine has disappeared. Okay. I retired because I was 60. And when I became 65, 66, I thought playing golf, playing tennis, and having not that much to do, I thought it's probably best I start a new business again. Okay. So I created Marine Underwriting on the same basis, being an authorized agent and an authorized underwriter for marine liability insurance. Okay. This is now 5-6 years in operation, and we are, as you can see, already sitting in a very nice office with about 20 people. We are very much focused on recruiting intelligent, young, unexperienced people, mainly from the Erasmus University, with whom we have a very good contact. And we have an internal training program for these people. And as I say, you can never be sure that people will stay. But it is still better to recruit people that are intelligent, that you train them and that they leave, than that you recruit them, not train them, and they stay. Okay. So we are very focused on making them the best of the market, with the risk of them finding another job somewhere else. And then we start all over again.
Quite interesting. Well, you are very, you still working. It's good in the industry, and I'm quite, you are very active as well on LinkedIn. That's why I reach you, because every time I scroll, LinkedIn, and I've seen your face on the post, and I say, you really use LinkedIn, and I check your profile, and you're working in insurance. I say, I really need someone to talk about insurance, because it's very crucial in this industry, and every stakeholders are facing this insurance. I mean, not issue, but because you need it. But first, I want to ask you this question about give kind of introduction of marine insurance, because we have different terms. It's very complicated for new people to understand what is it.
Well, to cut it down to the question what it is, the most clear answer I can give is that it is providing cover against marine perils. And a marine peril is something that can unexpectedly happen when you move a ship across the ocean, or when you move a cargo inside a ship across the ocean. And secondly, important for an insurance is that the buyer, who is called the assured, by paying this premium for covering the risks, he is, of course, protecting his balance sheet. And that is the pure explanation for understanding what it is.
Okay. So, because we have different types of insurance. For example, we have the hull insurance, cargo insurance, liability insurance. I've seen you have machinery insurance. Can you clarify all those terms, or maybe I forgot one of them?
Well, the main types are actually very simple, because in the main types, there are only two.
Okay.
You put the category of hull and machinery and cargo, you can put it together, because these insurances are covering the physical damages or physical losses to the ship or the cargo when it happens from an external peril.
Okay.
And when, of course, the event is uncertain.
Okay.
These are the general principles of an insurance policy. It must come from outside.
Okay.
And it must be uncertain.
Okay. So uncertain means...
Uncertain means it's likely not to happen.
Okay. I think it makes sense.
Whereas the other main type, which is called liability, or more specifically marine liability, where a lot of times the word protection and indemnity is used, P&I, because 90% of the world fleet is covered by P&I clubs, and the P&I insurance is a marine liability insurance that is covering the liabilities against the assured from third parties.
Okay.
So the assured is doing something of which another person thinks that he has done something wrong, that is causing a financial loss to that person, and then he claims from the ship owner on the basis of a liability. Okay. And that liability is then insured with a P&I club or another marine liability insurer. Because we are not a P&I club, we are a marine liability insurer.
Okay, and what is the main difference with a P&I club and the marine liability, in terms of tasks and responsibilities?
The P&I clubs are still structured on the basis of mutuality. That means that the owners of the P&I club are the members. So the companies that are buying a P&I cover are also the partial owner of the P&I club. Okay. That is, of course, different from a corporate insurance company, because a corporate insurance company will have shareholders.
Yes.
And the capital of an insurance company is coming from investors, from shareholders. Sure. Whereas the capital that is required in a P&I club is coming from the members of the P&I club.
Okay. Okay, interesting. If I'm a ship owner, I have a fleet of vessels. Do I need, what kind of insurance do I need? Because, of course, I need to have this protection and indemnity, P&I protection insurance, but as well I need the cargo insurance. So do I need every cover, or I can just pick one depending my needs?
we have to keep cargo insurance and hull and machinery insurance. We have to keep it apart,
Okay.
because hull and machinery is for the ship owner,
Yes.
and the cargo insurance policy is for the cargo owner and the commodity trader.
Charterer.
The ship owner, in the first place, he requires an hull and machinery policy for being covered against the loss and damages to the vessel from this marine peril. Secondly, he will also buy a war risks insurance policy, because the standard hull and machinery policy does not cover war. So there is a standard war risk policy then attached to the hull and machinery policy. In addition, the ship owner may also want a loss of hire insurance. That means that when the vessel is taken out of employment because of a casualty, and that means that the ship is idle during the time of the repairs,
Okay.
that there is an insurance which is called a loss of use, loss of hire insurance, that will covering the loss of time that the vessel was idle, not being able to operate because of the repair time.
Okay. Is it your role to make this consulting part to say to the ship owners and cargo owners, you need this type of insurance, or it's their responsibility, because it's not so easy to know exactly what we need if we don't know how it works, basically.
The marine insurance market is still very much dominated by the role of the insurance brokers. So in the first place, the ship owner has a contact with a broker, which is his broker, and that broker, knowing the market, knowing the insurances, is then going out to the market to get the insurances in place for the ship owner. Very typical for hull and machinery is that very rarely one insurer will take the whole risk.
Okay.
So if the value of a ship is 25 million, then it's very common that more than one insurers will take a participation of the 25 million risk.
Okay.
And it's not unusual that you will see 10 or 20 insurers on one policy.
Okay.
Only taking 2.5% or 5% or 10% or 15%. So also for that purpose, you need the broker to put that all together.
Okay.
That's typical for that market. And the same applies to the cargo insurance. Most cargo insurances are also placed with more than one insurer. And the name for that is co-insurance or subscription insurance. Then, on the other hand, if you look at the P&I industry and the marine liability industry, it's just the other way around. It's always one insurer for the whole risk.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Okay.
Despite the fact that the P&I and the marine liability insurance are offering higher limits.
Higher limits.
Higher limits.
Okay.
A ship of 25 million that is co-insured by 10 insurers, each of them taking 5 or 10%, then if that same ship is buying an insurance policy from the P&I, that it will only be one P&I club taking the whole risk and offering a very, very much higher limit.
Okay.
It's very normal for P&I insurance to have a cover for 500 million or for 1 billion, or with the international P&I clubs even up to 3 billion.
Okay, so it's like that because they have more funds to, or it's not just.
I think the best answer is that that it is more structured by reinsurance.
Okay.
And reinsurance it means that up to a certain level, risks are being forwarded to a reinsurer.
A reinsurer. Oh.
Yes, and then the reinsurer is the insurer of the P&I club.
Okay, so you have, in this case, you have 2 insurers.
Yes.
Wow. Is it possible to have even 3, 4, 5 insurance of insurance of insurance?
We should not get too deeply into this because then it becomes really complicated.
Okay.
But important to see that the major difference is with hull machinery and cargo, you see co-insurance, whereas on P&I and marine liability, you only see one insurer.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the significance of marine insurance?
Yeah, and I'm very glad that you asked this question because I don't think that we are all that aware of the fact how important it is that marine insurance exists. And the answer is, in fact, very simple. If you look at ships and cargoes, and you look about the investment in ships and cargoes, you come automatically to the conclusion that almost all ships and almost all cargoes are being financed.
Yeah.
The ships are getting a mortgage loan. The cargo are getting loans which are covered by letter of credits. And if you look into the total global trade, the numbers in fact are very simple. There are about 100,000 cargo carrying ships with a carrying capacity of about 2 billion tons. And those 100,000 ships needs to carry every year about 11 billion tons of cargo.
Okay.
And that number fits very well if you say 2 billion tons must carry 11 billion tons of cargo. It means that on average a ship will make about 5 to 6 laden voyages. And I think that is exactly the right figure to understand how the world trade is moving around this globe. Now, if most of these 100,000 ships are being financed, if most of these 11 billion tons of commodity is being financed, then in each loan contract, there is a stipulation that there needs to be a valid insurance policy in place. So for the cargo, that means a cargo policy. And for the ship, it means the hull and machinery policy. So if these insurances could not be offered, world trade would collapse.
Is it mandatory to have all this insurance, or it's not? It's not like my house insurance or my car insurance.
The hull and machinery and the cargo insurance is not mandatory.
Okay.
So you're free to go. But if you finance your trade or if you finance your vessel, you need to buy insurance.
Yeah, I mean,
as otherwise you will not be able to validate your loan agreements.
Okay. Okay. Yes, it's more for the bank and even for the certification, Lloyd's, etc. Registration.
The banks are very strict that a valid insurance policy is in place.
Okay.
And that brings me to the conclusion that marine insurance is playing a crucial function in world trade. Whereas if you compare marine insurance to the rest of the world's insurances, then we are only playing a very minor factor. Because in marine insurances, the total global income of premiums is about 35 billion. Whereas non-life insurances worldwide, so all insurances putting together, is 900 billion. So the percentage of marine insurance to the total global insurance market is only less than 4%. But this little branch is playing a very, very active and important role in the world trade because of these loan agreements.
Sweet. That's not something people talk a lot about.
No.
The insurance, that's crucial.
No, correct.
I'm going to come back to liability insurance. Because of course, machinery insurance is quite easy to understand. But for people, this term liability, it's quite complicated because this is something that, as you mentioned, you have with the P&I club, so protection and indemnity. Can you maybe give more like some example, concrete example, like how it works, this liability insurance? Or we can implement it?
Well, I think that everybody in the marine business will accept and understand that taking something out to the high seas is a marine risk that is unmeasurable. Yeah. So to convince the market that it is important to buy an insurance policy is not very difficult because they know that the risks are there and they never know when it will happen and they will never know how it will happen, and more importantly, they will not know to what amount it will happen. And last night, a bridge in Baltimore
We're going to come back.
collapsed, and how could this ship owner ever think that this could eventually happen to his ship?
Yeah. Yes.
So it's not difficult to make the market understand that you need to buy this insurance. And also because I think that there is enough awareness amongst the marine industry that a single claim can put them out of business.
Okay. Okay, we're going to talk about claims anyway.
And then additionally, the marine liability insurance availability is also very important for the fact that it is crucial because some insurance covers are mandatory. There are international conventions where certain risks must be insured by the P&I club on a direct basis, which means that a port state control or a flag state from will demand that before a ship is entering their jurisdiction or their port, that this vessel has a valid blue card, and the blue card is an undertaking by the P&I club to the extent that they say, yes, this ship is insured with my P&I club, and with this blue card, I undertake to pay any damages from pollution or from a wreck removal direct to you, even though the ship owner has disappeared or is unable to pay. Okay. So that is already a mandatory element for knowing that these 100,000 ships, they have all insurance.
Okay.
Because without the blue card, they cannot enter a port.
Okay, so it makes sense. Okay, interesting. And what about charter liabilities? Because that's a big topic, of course. I have the ship owners, the cargo owner, and how it works in this world of you always have disputes, I imagine. So,
charter's liability is our specialism. I like it a lot because the clients for charter's liability demand a lot of service.
okay.
They are entering into contracts with the cargo, they are entering into contracts with the ships, and most of these contracts have many clauses, and of course many things can happen where it unexpectedly is going wrong. So most people that are in the chartering business are aware of the fact that it is sensible to buy a charter's liability policy that will cover the liabilities that will be put against them from a third party. Okay. And how must you see that? What is then a typical liability for a charterer? Well, first of all, it is the cargo that is being carried. You could say it is the vessel of the owner that is carrying the cargo.
In case of damage due to the
Yes. But in the contract conditions, there are clauses being made and agreed that certain risks are for the account of the charterer. Then a major other risk type is the liability for damages to the vessel.
Yes.
So the charterer is using the vessel when something is happening that is damaging the vessel. And how could a vessel being damaged? It could be damaged by the cargo. It could be damaged by the cargo handling. It could be damaged by entering an unsafe port. It could be damaged by putting on board of the vessel out of spec bunker oil that is damaging the vessel or the machinery. So there is already enough obvious exposure to the charterer that it's not difficult to convince them that it makes sense to buy a charter's liability insurance.
And in mind, this good example, for example, this Roro vessel in the North Sea we had this summer in the Netherlands, like the car in fire into the ship. Like how it works in this process, because this is the fault of the charterer, because the cargo damaged completely the vessel on pollution. That we can mention as well.
Well, this was a car carrier, and there are more and more cars being carried,
yes,
especially now that China has become the biggest exporter of electric cars. So there is a lot of cars being moved by car carriers on the sea, and especially when you look at electric cars, there is this risk of batteries that explode and put that car and eventually, like in the North Sea, the whole ship on fire. Then, if the evidence is available that this fire started in that typical car, then the owner of that car, the charterer of that ship, will be exposed to certain liabilities. That is for sure. I don't have the details. The details that I have on a case that I have handled myself is that was on a container ship. Cargo was put in a container being misdescribed. So it was supposed to be non-hazardous, but apparently it was a dangerous cargo. So it had eventually to be stowed in a different position on board of the ship. That dangerous cargo got on fire with a huge damage to the ship, and of course rescue operations, fire operations, and so on. A multi-million-dollar claim, which from which the charterer of the ship could not escape.
Okay.
Because it was eventually proved that the cause of the incident was from this container where the cargo was being misdescribed.
So in this case, he has to take it to cover the cost.
Without insurance cover, on that particular case, you would take yourself out of business.
Yes, even if we were good insurance.
Now, if you were not insured,
If you are not insured, but mostly you try as a charterer, you try to
there are still charterers being uninsured
because of lack of knowledge, or just because they don't want to pay.
by saying, well, we have never had something, or we know what we are doing.
Okay, so excess of confidence, maybe.
But it's not if it will happen, it is just when it will happen. Eventually it will happen.
Okay, it's interesting. So we have many of charterers who are still not taking care of these kind of issues.
It's a bit dangerous.
Do you see a lot of actors, like stakeholders, taking risk like that, or nowadays it's uncommon? I mean, most of stakeholders try to have the best coverage possible in terms of insurance, liability, etc.
I think the majority of charterers are buying chartered liability insurance.
Okay.
But where we can say that all the ship owners are buying it, I can't say that all the charterers will be buying it.
Okay. Is it depending as well to the country, of course? For example, some countries it's quite common to avoid this kind of insurance, or other countries everyone has, for example, in Europe or comparison with I don't know, South America. They don't want any.
It's difficult to give a very good answer to that. Because if you have been in a business for 5 years and you have never been confronted with a liability, it's of course easier to say, but look, this can never happen to me.
Yeah.
But I would say, if it hasn't happened to you in the last 5 years, the chances that it will happen is getting bigger.
Definitely. Okay, interesting. What can you say about claims management? I mean, first of all, what kind of claims are the most common one in the maritime industry? And secondly, how you can manage it in your daily basis?
The most common claims are cargo claims.
Okay.
So a loss or a damage to a cargo during the transport from port A to port B.
Okay.
And how can cargo get damaged by the roughness of the sea?
Yeah, sure.
But it could also be by not having been careful enough in stowing the cargo safely at the port of loading, so that during the voyage there is something happening to the cargo. You have damages to cargo from wetness.
Okay.
If cargo is being loaded during the rain, then of course the cargo is getting wet by sweet water.
Yeah.
Whereas if the vessel is going through a rough passage on the ocean, there could be some water ingress if the hatches of the vessel are not completely watertight.
Okay.
And that means there is salt water damage to the cargo. These claims we see. Then there is also a big variety of what we call paper claims.
Okay.
It means that if you have signed for a certain amount of cargo to be shipped, and you put that in the bill of lading, that this is the amount of cargo that you have received. And in the discharging port, by weighing techniques, they say, look, I have not received 10,000 tons, I have only received 9,500 tons. Okay. Then, if this is a cargo of fertilizer, it's very unusual for anybody during the voyage to have eaten the fertilizer because it's not eatable.
Yeah.
It's very unlikely that the ship owner during the sea passage has sold it to somebody else. So I always arrive at the point that I say, look, this is a paper claim, But the problem in the contractual conditions of the bill of lading are that you have to deliver the same amount of cargo as you have signed for in the loading port. And if you have signed for 10,000 and they are only weighing 9,500 in the discharge port, they can claim the 500 tons against the ship owner.
Oh, well. Yeah.
Or the charterer.
Understood.
So these things happen, unfortunately. They have to be cured by prevention. You have then to talk to your clients and say, look, can you not be a little bit more careful in measuring the amount of cargo to be loaded in the loading port? Can you change your contractual conditions? Would it be advisable to send a surveyor to the loading port to help you in ascertaining the amount of cargo? So there are always two sides of the page. Of course, you are dealing with the claims, but you need to learn from the dealings of the claims to see whether you can help the client with prevention. Okay. So that is a balancing act.
Okay, interesting. I just want to come back something I wanted to ask you. I forgot to ask you about the limit of liability. I didn't provide the discussion, but yesterday I did some research and I found these terms. Can you explain what is it, limit of liability, and how it works?
Well, you can talk about two limits of liability. Okay. You can talk about the limit of the policy, okay, and you can talk about whether you can limit your liability when something happens. Okay. Well, the policy limit is what you agree on the insurance contract, and that could be 25 million, that could be 100 million, that could be 500 million, which means that up to that amount you have cover. To what amount you will be held liable remains to be seen on the claim, but there are international conventions about the right to limit your liability in comparison to the size of the ship. Okay. So there is a formula that will calculate what your maximum liability will be when when a large loss will happen. Okay. And if you then look at the very, very, very big accidents that have happened in the last 30, 40 years, then in most cases, they will have tried to limit liability, and whether or not you are successful in getting your limitation fund awarded depends on the jurisdiction of the case. So, where was the incident? In what jurisdiction? And which applicable law must then make a decision about whether or not you can make a limitation fund, and there is no one clear answer that you can give.
Okay.
Of course, it can also happen that you make your application for a limitation fund and that the other party will say, but look, you cannot be allowed to limit your liability because you have been in gross negligence. You have done something that you could have avoided. So it's always a very complex legal process about getting a limitation fund awarded by the court.
So if you get this limitation, it's always a must. I mean, plus.
In every big incident, the P&I club or the marine liability insurer, they will always try to get the limitation fund approved. I have no figures about the the success level.
Okay, but to get this limitation, it's like a due diligence process. You will examine like your history. Your...
Well, you will of course say, look, it was very unlikely to happen, but it happened. We had everything in compliance and safety. We had everything in place, and it still happened. We are not at fault, and we want the limitation fund to be approved for that reason. But that means that in accordance with the measurement of the ship, a limitation fund is something like 20 million, whereas the damage is 100 million. It means that the claiming party will not get 80 million.
Yes. So it's still...
So it's always a big legal fight.
Okay, interesting. But let's switch to underwriting process, because I think you have a lot to say about it, because it's your main activities. And I would ask you, what is it? The definition of underwriting, because this is not common for people.
Well, if somebody would give a technical answer to which he is totally entitled, he would probably never sell a policy. So how must you implement your underwriting process? Of course, you have a technique of doing it, but I would rather replace the word technique by practice. So first of all, you need to know your client's business. Secondly, you need to know the legal position of your client in the contracts that he is going into. Bills of ladings, charter parties, contracts of affreightments. Then you also can look a little bit at in which jurisdictions will be his trade, because it makes a difference whether you go with a cargo of sugar to West Africa or you go with a cargo of cement to Turkey.
Yeah.
So you have to weigh these things, and if you don't take these into consideration and only go by your technique, you will probably always end up to the wrong figure. Then, of course, you need to manage data. And you can manage data by creating a benchmark tool with the help of your IT system. You can manage data by experience. And you can manage data by the loss record of the client. So if you have a client for a number of years, you are building data which is specifically related to his own losses.
Okay, interesting. But I want to ask you, because underwriting, what is the goal? I mean, because you already explained the process, but why we need underwriting? To estimate the value of what is the price of the insurance at the end? Can you just make a quick definition of what is it?
I think that in the underwriting process, it is also very important that you make a difference between a loss record with attritional frequency claims and a loss record where in a whole year this client was hit by a very unexpected peril. And usually that is a bigger claim. And we have a strategy that we should not be penalizing our clients on their loss record for one big claim, because this is exactly what you are insuring. Whereas if there are a lot of attritional claims, which if you analyze them, are caused by operational measures or even by some operational commercial mistakes, that you need to manage them away by improving your operational levels and see whether in the next year you can reduce the attritional claims. But if the attritional claims are in the record, we respond to it and say, look, these needs to be financed by the insurance conditions. And the insurance conditions are deductibles and premiums. Whereas if you have been very unlucky to have this one big claim that has just been falling on your head and not on the head of somebody else, then we as insurers must accept that this claim needs to be paid without penalizing the client that it has happened. So for me, that is in the underwriting process a big difference in approach between these two elements.
Okay. And what is if you're doing your job in a perfect way, what is benefiting, what your clients are like, what kind of advantage your clients will get? Paying less amount of money for the insurance, but in case of issue, he will be more insured?
I think that the most important aspect of being an insurer is to take a client-friendly approach and to show your presence. To show your presence in answering questions, to show your presence in dealing with claims. And if you do that constantly and consistently, they will appreciate your level of service. And they will continue to be insured by Insure Marine. Right. And that is exactly what we are seeing. We call that a retention rate. So how many of our clients are staying year after year?
Okay.
And our percentage at the moment is 96%.
That's great. It's the customer retention, no? Yeah.
Exactly.
That's great. Okay. Clear. You already told us a little bit about the key information on data we need for the underwriting process. You explain us like benchmark or those. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more? It's quite interesting.
I explained the underwriting process. If you then look in what kind of key information must you have on file to be able to assess the risk and make an appropriate quotation, is that you need to know the details of the vessel. You need the details of the cargo. You need the management details. What is the quality of the management of the company that you are dealing with? The operational details. So how are you doing your operational management? The compliance and regulations, because today, unlike 20 years ago, we must be compliant with everything. So to look at how the client is compliant with everything is also important in the key information that you want. Then, of course, the key information is that you have to take into account as an insurer that there are market trends. And we call that a hard market and a soft market. A hard market is that the amount of insurance available is less than the demand for insurance. And a soft market is that the market is flooded by insurers. Okay. And that means that the prices will go down. And of course, that is important key information because you need to adjust. You're going by the trend. Then, of course, key information is that you see, is there an interaction between us and the client about mitigation and prevention? In other words, is the client listening to us, to what we have to say about what could be mitigated or what could be prevented? And then, of course, the analysis of everything legal and contractual. It's very important key information, which means that we thoroughly need to read the contracts before being able to assess the risk.
It's a very technical job. I mean, you need to understand how it works, like the management companies, operation of a vessel.
Well, some things are logical, and you can do it without a legal background.
At least maritime
But
knowledge.
But principally, it is important not only to have a legal background, but to also to be motivated to be in a legal environment.
Okay.
Because it's not an easy job.
No. And it's good transition to my another topic, which is career progression. What kind of options we have for people who are really want to work in the insurance world?
Well, I cannot, of course, talk for the whole market, because if I look to my peers, then I see different strategies. But we have changed our strategy dramatically by saying, look, let us build internal training programs and let us accept to be starting with young, unexperienced people. Okay. That's how we found contact with the Erasmus University, where I have done a presentation, and this was and still is well received, and we still are getting applicants that would like to work for us, but at the moment we have no vacancies, but we will definitely have further vacancies in 2025. And now, how to look at these young, inexperienced people, because not everybody will be suitable, even if you have studied maritime law. I think it is important that you can find out from these people that they have a willingness to invest in a marine career.
Okay.
Then, secondly, important is this person showing a passion for something? Because if you are not passionate, how are you going to achieve?
Yeah, sure.
Then what we have put in our core values is that you need to develop an understanding of how can you be empathetic. So how are you willing to put yourself one step back and say, look, let me really understand you. Okay. So the empathy approach that we are building in this company is very important. And then, of course, you need to build your knowledge base, because if you have studied maritime law, then you have a good basis. But from all the people that we have recruited, they say, look, it was nice to have my master, but it's now much nicer to see the real world. And then what I always find important for people is to say, look, you have always to find the right balance between your ambition and your ability. Because if your ambition is much higher than your ability, you are becoming a frustrated person, because you, in your ambition, you want to make steps, but your ambition is your ability is just not enough to get there. Whereas the other way, if you have a very high ability and a very low ambition, then it's also frustrating, because the person will say, yeah, but I already know it, with a very low ambition. Okay, no. So I'm always trying to manage to find the balance. And when I talk to the young people to make the next step in their career, I will always show them this, to say, look, do you think there is enough balance between your ambition and ability? Because I do not want a frustrated person here.
Yes, that's a clear point, fair point. I want to ask you the last question of the podcast to make this kind of conclusion to everything you said, which was very interesting. Let's illustrate this insurance world with the case of this Baltimore bridge. This issue with this cargo ship. I don't ask you to answer to solve the problem. I just ask you, try to illustrate the different parties, stakeholders we have with all these liabilities, hull insurance, just to make this last picture for people to understand why insurance is crucial for example, these daily cases, which is public investigation.
Well, for the ship owner, it is crucial that he is entered with the Britannia P&I Club, which is one of the international group clubs. So for that, he is in a safe haven.
Okay.
Because even if this casualty has happened by the negligence of the crew, it's still covered.
Okay.
It would not be covered if the manager of the ship, the owner of the ship, would have said to the captain, please hit that pillar.
Of course.
But in this case, okay, was it a navigational error? Was it a loss of power of the vessel? There was a pilot on board. But anyhow, we have seen what has happened. The vessel hit this pillar and the bridge collapsed. So yes, I would think that the ship owner is perfectly covered by his P&I insurance. What's a bit funny in this case is that it's being reported that it is a ship owner from Singapore. Mm-mm. Whereas it was very clearly mentioned that it was a ship chartered by Maersk.
Yes.
Now, if you look at this incident, and if you would want to look at whether or not you could get something out of Maersk for this, then my simple answer is that it's very unlikely that there will be any liability on the part of Maersk. And this is a ship owner incident to which the charterer has nothing to do. Because
yes,
it's also very unlikely that Maersk has said, hit this pillar.
Yeah, sure. For sure.
It has already been reported that the biggest claim of recent date was the claim of the Concordia.
Yes.
That wrecked on this beautiful island, and that amounted to a liability claim of 1.5 billion. And it is estimated or thought over that the claims on this casualty could be far bigger.
Wow. Okay.
But for sure, this ship owner will request for a limitation fund to be raised in the calculation of the size of the vessel and the figures that stand for that. But okay, the jurisdiction of this case is very clear. It's US. There are casualties because I think there are 6 people missing.
Yes.
Then, of course, there is a huge property damage because they have to rebuild the bridge. Then there is a huge removal. You have to everything of the bridge needs to be removed. I think few containers were lost into the river, so they have to be rescued. I've not heard there were personal injuries on board of the ship. And the damages to the ship itself, and of course the damages to the cargo inside of these containers are probably minor to the value of the rebuilding of the bridge.
Yeah, for
But apparently, President Biden has said, look, the federal state is going to pay for the rebuilding of the bridge in order not to delay, because if you would only start rebuilding the bridge after you know whether you can recover it from the ship owner, it will probably take a couple of years.
For sure. Yeah.
But these claims will be presented, for sure.
Thank you for your insights. It's quite interesting.
With pleasure.
It was a pleasure to having you in this podcast episode. I think you provide us a lot of value, especially in this insurance world, which is quite unknown, but very crucial. And it's happening every day. Ships collision on issues, but even the fact that you need to insure your ship. So thank you, Martin, and I wish you all the best.
I would like to express one personal motivation. And that is that why would a person of 72 years of age still want to be in the front line of the business? Yes, of course, I'm easily motivated to do this. But I think it's important in a wider perspective to always work hard in contributing to a strong maritime, the Netherlands. And that, for me, is probably the most important driver of my motivation to do this.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and watching this episode. We are looking forward to bring you more insights from maritime professionals, experts, and students. Do not hesitate to follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Your support means a lot to us and helps us to bring you more content.